We come to our final session of the day on the main program. I have the pleasure and honor of introducing a man who needs very little introduction. That, of course, is Mr. Neil Oliver. Now, Neil is a renowned historian and archaeologist, or at least I should say formerly known as a renowned historian and archaeologist. But thank goodness he took that path, because this gave this man a voice and a way to articulate that can help become a voice of reason in this time of unrest and uncertainty, helping us to navigate the rocky terrain of what we're going here with his restless curiosity in pursuit of the truth, but also in pursuit of what makes us human and in defense of freedom. Neil has become a powerful voice and a fierce critic of the technocratic systems that we're resisting here today. But I think we may get a little hint of optimism tonight. We will see. With his eloquence, Neil has a unique ability to help us to explore these issues. And it's my honor to welcome Neil Oliver to the stage. Please give it up for Neil Oliver!
Hello, everyone. It's so huggy in here. Everywhere I go, I get hugged. What is it with all the long-haired men? Have you noticed? I counted 3 long-haired men in a row, which made me think of the line in Withnell and I, while I was sitting there watching all these long hairs, where Danny, the drug dealer, says, all barbers are in the pay of the government. Never get your hair cut, because your hairs are your aerials. They receive signals from the cosmos and transmit them directly to your brain. So maybe there's something in it. I've said to a couple of people outside, I used to write speeches basically for events like this, but as time has gone on, I've found almost that to some extent I've said it all. I've said what I meant to say. And so now, when I come to an event like this, what I try to do, as I did coming in yesterday, coming in this morning, talking to people, and then listening to some sessions this afternoon, I try to listen and perhaps get new ideas and reflect, because I mean, everything I'm going to say to you here it's only my opinion, and I offer up my opinion. Really, it's like letting a child go at kindergarten or nursery. You send them out in the hope that when they come back, they've learned something that they didn't know before. And I feel like that with my opinions. I just put them out, and then I listen to what happens, and then I try to draw from that. I also was listening to Derek in particular there. I was listening to everyone this afternoon closely. Derek made me feel like such a fraud. Is the truth, because I've got feet of clay. I've got a bank account. I am still enmeshed in the system. And so standing amongst and with people who are constructively and creatively stepping beyond, I do feel quite fraudulent. Being invited up here to close the session. Those who find themselves ridiculous sit down next to me, to quote 90s pop band James. I mean, if you feel sitting here listening to other speakers that you're not actually doing it, that you're not actually active as an activist, well, let me be the first person in that queue. But nonetheless, the time I've spent with you yesterday afternoon and this morning and today, I genuinely feel overwhelmed and humbled. And I'm not blowing smoke at all when I say that. It's absolutely genuine. And by some process that I think is probably ultimately healthy, I actually stand here now feeling that I know less than I thought I knew 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 2 years ago. I'm in this sort of Socratic process of realizing that in most meaningful ways, I don't know anything at all, but I do know that I don't know anything. And so I benefit greatly from being in the company of people like all of the people that you've been listening to and all of the people that I've been talking to, because I'm in this constant process of trying to work out what's happening. Clearly, for the first 5 decades of my life, I just didn't know what was going on. I had it all wrong. I was duped. I was as fooled as the next person. I was as trusting of the state and of authority as the next person. I make no bones about it. I get picked up all the time, comments and to pieces that I put out online and things that I say on GB News and whatever, people saying, welcome to the party, and you've finally woken up. I hold my hands up. I was asleep. I was asleep for most of my life, and I don't pretend to have been any kind of oracle or to have known anything that was going on until really a rapid process of becoming aware began for me in 2020, like I'm sure it did for a lot of the people in this room. As I say, in that trying to be true to that idea of listening to what people are saying here, and learning and processing it and moving forward with it. I listened to David talking about the Constitution of the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence, and talking about rights. And what he was reminding me to think of in that context was, yes, that rights are received from God or from the universe or from nature or from natural law or whatever it is you think about when you contemplate the transcendent. And therefore, no person can take those rights from you, me. But almost, I would say, the most important, and I've said this before, to me, it's the inalienable aspect of those rights, because I hadn't properly contemplated what inalienable meant until relatively recently. And in that it means that even if you want to give up your freedom, you can't, because your rights are inalienable. So even if someone comes to you and says, I want to enslave you, and you think, actually that would be quite straightforward. They'll tell me what to do, they'll tell me what to eat, when to go to work, when to go to sleep, maybe I'll just be enslaved. The fact is you can't. That option is not available because your rights are inalienable. And it's actually in the moment when someone seeks to enslave you that you have no option, actually, if you're true to inalienable rights, but to say, I can't not be free. And you're going to have to take my freedom out of my chest along with my beating heart, because it's not mine to give. You'll have to take my freedom from me with life itself, which will make a lot of people think about, Mel Gibson says in Braveheart. But it is true. You can't, and that's where the responsibility and almost the onerous obligation of freedom kicks in, because you have to carry it. You have no obligation but to be free. You have no option but to be free. It's the obligation that transcends all. And I think that's very. And so I was thinking about that as I was listening to David, because I think some of these things are so important to contemplate. To think again about things that perhaps a lot of us have taken for granted. Yeah, I knew about the first couple of paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence, but it's only been in the last few years when I have seen my own freedom threatened that I've actually bothered to contemplate once again what the authors of that document actually meant. And you can also caveat that by saying it was a bit rich, coming from men who, in many instances, owned slaves, and yet they were writing about freedom and inalienable rights of men. But nonetheless, that's just a reminder from a couple of hundred years ago that we are all of us are just flawed human beings. So that even the founding fathers were just flawed human beings. I listened also to Sam talking about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. And I am no specialist in that area, but I am fascinated by it. And like Sam, I think I understand intuitively, really, the potential of the blockchain and that idea of being able to transact peer-to-peer. And that transaction isn't only limited to money, that you can also transact with information. And so fundamentally, I'm interested in the idea of the blockchain, because it can't be censored. Where's that? Where's that coming from? I can hear Derek Rose. Is that a voice in my head, or is everyone hearing that? Has Derek Rose got into my head? But I was thinking, while Sam was talking about blockchain, my shtick, if you like, online, even before I got into things that are controversial, and before I started inadvertently making a name for myself as somebody, some sort of, low watt polemicist, I was always in the business of reflecting on what history had to, how history could reassure us, in that almost everything that happens now, that some of which might be worrisome and the cause of anxiety, it's happened before. We can take some reassurance from it. So I was listening to the concept of blockchain and distributed ledger, which is another bit of the jargon, a bit of the lexicon that applies to cryptocurrency, is actually very, very old. In the Yap archipelago of islands in the Western Pacific, the people there no one really knows for how long, but possibly for thousands of years, had as the basis of their economy gigantic carved stones called rai, great big calcite donuts, a very hard rock carved into a donut shape. And some of these things are bigger than parked cars. They're enormous, and they don't move. They are where they are, in a clearing, beside a path, wherever. They stay where no one ever moves them. And everyone knows the story of every rai. Every transaction, if you like, is remembered. And the longer the story that relates to a given rai adds to its value. Because rai the ownership of a rai changes for something big. So that when a family needs a husband for a daughter, or vice versa, or where there's been a war between two clans and a peace settlement was being agreed, it was in those kind of momentous events that the ownership of a rai would change hands. And so that which didn't move, no one touched, had belonged to this clan here, is now understood to belong to that clan over there, maybe miles away, but it's their rai. And now an extra chapter has been added to that, and so its value has increased. And that's distributed ledger in a fundamental sense. No one touches it, no one moves it, everyone knows who it belongs to, and everyone knows every transaction going all the way back to its beginning. And it's absolutely extraordinary. These things, in large part, the raw material for these is not actually found in the mainland of the Yap archipelago. A lot of it comes from an island called Palau, which is scores of miles away across the open ocean. And the people were in the habit of going to Palau, to the outcrop of this calcite, chipping off somehow an enormous, weighing many tons, carving it into the familiar donut shape, and then fixing it to their dugout canoes or whatever, and moving it across the open ocean again and back to Yap. And on one famous occasion, a team coming back, they were within sight of land, they were almost about to make landfall, and this thing broke away from the canoes and it sank. It just dropped to the bottom of the ocean, never to be recovered. However, it's the most valuable rai because of its origin story. And transactions are still made based on the rai that's in the ocean, on the seabed. At any given time, it was owned by this family, and then it would change hands, and it would belong to that family. Nobody could touch it, nobody could see it, but its story was understood, and the value was there. And so, if like me, you can't get your head around crypto, or you can't get your head around blockchain, and you can't get your head around distributed ledger, at least be reassured, as I am, by the fact that the underlying principle of it is ancient, and that the digital iteration that we know as Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of the rest of it it's just the latest iteration of a much older idea. And I find that very helpful. I find that very helpful to contemplate. Now, I was listening to Derek saying the bit about they could have brought in a lot of people here and filled a lot of seats with the doom mongers and the people that have been pointed out. That's me. I am that soldier. I've spent the last 4 years being as miserable as sin to an audience several times a week. That is me. But as is famously said, it's never hard to distinguish between a Scotsman and a ray of sunshine. So, you know this thing about me feeling fraudulent? I've got a bank account, I'm a miserable bastard, I only look back, I offer no solutions, I point at other people, simultaneously pointing at myself. That's me! So anybody that feels that they're not pulling their weight, thank you, I love you too. Anyone that feels that they are not or have not so far pulled their weight in any of this, well, you know, join that club because I'm there with you. I was listening also when David said, another ponytailed man, when David was talking about, you know, sort of being in the moment, you know, and grasping the now, which absolutely is a state of mind that I try to be in because of my innate pessimism. And I was thinking about Kung Fu Panda. Because it's in Kung Fu Panda that we learn from, is it Chi-Fu? I can't remember, that yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. And that's, you know, and it's that concept is allowed to percolate all the way through to whatever, you know, an animated feature for kids. You know, if they get nothing else from it, at least they get that idea. I used to plan these talks, but now, as I say, I just want to be standing here in the moment, paying back to you that which I have acquired in the last few hours or the last couple of days at most. I went out for some wine last night with a lovely chap. I'm not sure if he wants to remain nameless or not, but given that I'm not sure, I won't say who that was, but we had a great conversation. Amongst other things, we contemplated, you know, maybe leaving the country. Where would you go? You know, I mean, I've had that conversation. My wife and I have that conversation all the time. You know, if our circumstances made that possible, where would we go? Our circumstances don't make that possible. So we are going to ride this out here. Like the emperor penguins in Happy Feet, while others leave, we remain. You can see how shallow my philosophy actually is. You know, Nigel was talking there about all the philosophical underpinnings. I get all of my philosophy from watching movies. But we were talking about, you know, would we stay or would we go? And I was reminded of another movie, which is Buckaroo Banzai and His Adventures Across the Eighth Dimension. And Buckaroo Banzai's wisdom is, wherever you go, there you are, which is great wisdom. I think Einstein said something similar, but the idea is that, you know, whatever it is you're trying to get away from is ultimately you, and wherever you go, there you are. And so all of these thoughts have been coming back to me most helpfully because of the time that I've spent here. You know, these were not thoughts that I arrived with. All of these reminiscences and all of these thoughts are fresh. Dan Aston Gregory, lovely man, so fond of Dan, so fond of all the people in here because of that almost that desperation that they radiate to get to somewhere better. And also, if it is desperation, I think it's because they understand that which is true, which is that we will win. You know, we will, the natural order, which has been subverted, and I would be the first to admit, I don't know when that subversion of the natural order began or was achieved, but it has been subverted. But like a ball held under the surface of water, you know, you can hold it down there for as long as you've got the strength, but the ball wants to be somewhere else. And eventually it will return there. So we will win. And Dan was saying that he hoped that I would offer up some optimism, which, God, I find it difficult. If it's solutions you want, I am not your man. But I was thinking about what would I offer in terms of what are the solutions to the predicament in which we find ourselves? If someone said to me, and I couldn't see them, let's say I was in a darkened room and so I didn't know who they were, but somebody said, you know, what should I do in pursuit of the better life? Without a shadow of a doubt, I would simply say, get married and have kids. Now, if it's possible for you, you know, get married and if you can, have kids. That is my advice, because I can honestly say that the underpinning of everything that I do, everything that I have, and that which gives me the determination to keep moving forward, even though, as previously stated, I am a pessimist and a glass half empty kind of a person, is because of my wife and kids. You know, for people, I think transformation, one of the speakers this afternoon definitely invoked the idea of transformation. And if you want to see, okay, I can only make it personal. As I said, I can only offer my opinions. I was going to call this talk Not Only But Also, in that I think it's important to not to think that you have to find a single solution and drop everything that you've thought before, move away from your life of before and adopt a new one. It's just about opening your mind and embracing alternatives so that you're in a situation of not only, but also, so that you've got options, plan B, and whatever. So get married and have kids would be my number one solution. I mean, Trudy, to me, I call Trudy my Swiss Army wife, because whatever job I need to get done, the tool for getting it done lies with my wife. And when we had children, like everyone who's got kids will say, if you want to see a transformation in yourself, have a child, because that's real magic. And, you know, at times like these, when it feels like we're surrounded by a storm, and I suppose metaphorically speaking, we are at the eye of some sort of hurricane, and we don't know when or if it's going to blow out, but it will. The positivity that I get simply from my family is 100% absolutely all and everything that matters to me and enables me to move forward. So that's the central piece of advice that I would give. I'm also, you know, to get back to the whole cryptocurrency thing and the blockchain, which I find intimidating. I make no bones about it. God knows I read the books and I listen to the podcasts, and for about 15 or 20 seconds after the podcast finishes, I've got a handle on what blockchain is, and then it falls out of my head and I walk away from it and it's gone until I listen to the next one. But I do try. But I do have Luddite tendencies, which I'll admit to. I'm pessimistic, I'm a doom monger, I'm as miserable as sin, and I'm a Luddite. All of these things are true. And so in the not only but also category, while I pay attention to and I'm open to a concept like cryptocurrency and blockchain, I'm also about not only but also. And so while I have and do compose a lot of my work on a desktop computer, I do use a computer. I've also acquired a manual typewriter and reams of paper, and I can touch type. I was taught to touch type when I trained as a journalist many years ago, along with shorthand. I've still got 110 words a minute, T-line shorthand. Woo! Get me. And I've reacquainted myself with the keyboard of a manual keyboard, which is completely different from the kind of keyboard that you get with a computer. My kids, because my kids are completely on board. My kids, I feel so much sympathy, but I've heard so many stories about people for whom all of that's been happening in the last few years created a schism between relationships and within families. We didn't have that. I mean, my wife and I and my kid, we didn't take any of the medical interventions, the jabs. We didn't touch any of that. But in my extended family, they all did. Everybody in my extended family, my mum, my sisters, my mother-in-law, everybody else took the jabs. But even at that, although we had taken different paths there was no rancor, and nobody was upset with anybody for the path that they had. For the path that they had taken. But to get back to my kids bought me a Walkman. You know those, it's actually the latest model. It's called We Are Rewind. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a lovely metal, aesthetically very pleasing. I've started buying tapes again. We've always had in the house VHS players and VHS tapes. Some of them that go all the way back to tapes of Christmas movies that my wife made when she was a teenager. And we've still got them. We've got DVD players and piles of DVDs. We've got CD players and piles of CDs. We've got record players and vinyl. We've got all of these things. I buy hard copies of books all the time. I prowl around secondhand bookshops because I know with absolute certainty that all the stuff that's streamed and all the stuff that's available in that remote way is going to get tampered with. Yeah. You know, so in 5 years' time, or even now perhaps, if you were to download, I don't know, To Kill a Mockingbird onto your Kindle, you've got no way of knowing if it's what Harper Lee actually wrote, because it's potentially been modified to suit the mores of the day. So we're stockpiling. If I was a multi-millionaire, if I was a millionaire, I would have an aircraft hangar piled high with books and tapes and CDs and DVDs and rolls of film. I would have all of that stuff in climate-controlled environment, because I think in the years ahead, that stuff is going to become, I mean, you talk about keeping solid gold and silver as investment. Actual hard copy of the original works as intended by the author or by the musician or by the filmmaker or whatever, those are going to be worth their weight in gold. So that's part of how I cope. That's part of how I go in pursuit of my solutions. And I also wanted to talk in the context of currency about the Bradbury pound. Do you know about the Bradbury pound?
Yes.
Does everybody know about that?
Yes.
Hands up if you know about the Bradbury pound. I mean, for those that don't, in 1914, war was declared. The general populace, as they always do when a war is declared, got anxious about the £5 notes, typically, that they had in their pockets. At that time, 1914, £1 was worth £160 in today's money. So a £5 note was a great deal of money. And people were anxious about if there's a war, if the economy crashes, is this going to become valueless? So the banks were suddenly aware that they knew that they didn't have enough gold to let people redeem their gold if they were to present these bank notes. And so the bankers went scuttling to David Lloyd George, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, and they laid out the problem to him. And they must have already had the plan prearranged, because a bill was hustled through Parliament over the course of a 4-day sort of bank holiday weekend, and Treasury notes were released. Now, these were not bank notes released by the Bank of England. These were Treasury notes that were issued, underwritten by the value, the wealth of the country. So the creativity, the industry, the potential muscle power of the people, everything that you can think of that is there in the innate value of a nation was what was not gold, but it was all of that potential was what was underwriting these treasury notes. And crucially, they were interest-free and debt-free. Interest-free and debt-free money. And so the banks reopened, the people turned up with their banknotes and were asked, rather than gold, will you take these treasury notes? They were called Bradbury pounds because the permanent secretary to the Treasury at the time was John Bradbury, and he had signed them. They were printed on stamp paper because they were short of time. So these Bradbury pounds, as they became known, were going out, and all the people took them. The people took them because they had faith in themselves, because ultimately they were the country, and that they were persuaded that value underwriting these things made them credible. And so the Bradbury pounds went out, the banks reopened, there was no run on the bank, and the problem was solved. But of course the bankers, their immediate short-term problem having been sold, were panic-stricken because debt-free, interest-free money. Where's the return on that? And so within weeks, within a matter of days actually, they were back at David Lloyd George, and they persuaded him to start withdrawing the Bradbury pounds and to get back into the old game of buying and selling government bonds at 3 to 4% interest. Britain's national debt in 1914 was about £650 million. By 1919, in the time of the Treaty of Versailles, the national debt was £7.5 billion, because the bankers, having got back to the buying and selling of interest debt-laden bonds, had made a killing from the killing. Now, not only, but also crypto, holding gold, transacting in all sorts of different ways, but it is worth contemplating that something that solved an enormous problem in the past could, in a modernized iteration of the same thing, solve the problem again. Now, it's not the cure-all. It's not some magical panacea, and it's open to be corrupted by the government of the day if the government is malign. But nonetheless, it's just a different way of thinking. I think something else that was coming out of some of the presentations that were made this afternoon was about democracy, and we heard about the power of the people, which is all well and good, but I I myself am suspicious about majorities. I'm sure a lot of people in here have learned to be wary of majorities for the same reason as me, which is to say that if lockdowns and mandated vaccinations had gone out as referenda to the British population, the majority would have waved through both, without a shadow of a doubt, because that would have been the decision of the majority. And that would have changed the situation radically. So I'm wary about, democracy in principle, the rule of the people governing themselves is a grand idea, but it's really only the basis for a conversation. You've got to be very careful about how much you empower the majority, because the majority can very quickly become the mob, and the mob is always and only a tool of the state or the elite, because they influence and drive the mob using the things they control, which are propaganda and media and all of the rest of it. And down through history, there's never been a popular revolution. The French Revolution, that wasn't done by the people. That was reverse engineered to look like that after the fact. That was basically one crime family knocking out another crime family to take control of the governance of France. Likewise with the Russian Revolution, that wasn't the peasants storming the Winter Palace to get rid of the Romanov czars. There was nothing of the kind. The English Revolution, Cromwell and all of that, these were not popular revolutions. And even if they were, I'm wary around the idea of majorities. Now, what I would say is important to get back to remembering is the power that the jury system, as it was originally conceived, the power that the jury system has to empower the people to govern themselves. That is not achieved with voting every 4 or 5 years in a general election. That is an optical illusion. That's a mirage. That is meaningless and does nothing. The idea of the jury trial, as it was originally conceived, as it was actually thought about in terms of Anglo-Saxon history, in terms of and the Anglo-Saxons had acquired the idea from ancient Greece. It's a very old idea that just kept on being reiterated. It features in Magna Carta, 1215, but it wasn't invented for Magna Carta, the idea of the king being brought to account before a jury of his peers. That was just an iteration of a very old idea. And the point with the jury trial, which has been completely traduced and corrupted, down through the decades, empowered the jury to judge not just the guilt or innocence of the accused, but the justice of the law itself. They could actually, as well as judging on the accused, they could actually find the legislation that related to the case inadequate, suboptimal, unsatisfactory, and cast it out. They could act so that the law, which is coming down from on high in 1215 or whatever, it was the king. In more recent times, it's the government legislating, and the legislation could be judged for its justice moment by moment in real time by the jury. And majority verdicts are a corruption of the entire system. It ought to be, and it was originally designed to be, that in a jury of 12, if 11 people said guilty and one person said not guilty, then the verdict of that jury was not guilty. Because the principle was that the individual, in the face of the majority, had to be taken into account. And so the very idea now of majority verdicts is a complete corruption of the idea. And so in terms of looking at solutions, I've kind of become a proto-anarchist. I've got to the point now that if I was offered a binary choice between totalitarianism and anarchy, I'd have to go with anarchy. And in the same way that, 5 years ago, I would not have described myself as a free speech absolutist. But where we are now, the way things have gone, if it's a choice between everyone being able to say anything they want, incite whatever, be as vile, be as provocative, say the most dreadful things, whatever, as well as all the good stuff, or every day getting an email telling you the 10 things you have to say today, and if you don't say all 10 of them, you might not be able to put fuel in your car or put food on your table. If it's a binary choice between those, then I'm sorry, I'm a free speech absolutist and I'm an anarchist. So it is reflecting on for me, it's reflecting on the past and it's contemplating the things that are in my control, and it is paying attention to the things ultimately that I value. That is the basis of how and it's only my opinion, that's how I have sought a way and found a way to navigate through this encircling, swirling madness in which we find ourselves. And the not only but also philosophy that I've kind of, scribbled down on the back of an envelope effectively, it's about, it's a response to the overweening idea that's out there from the powers that ought not to be, which is something I just learned today from Nigel and will be passing off as my own from this point on. The powers that ought not to be. And where was I? What was I thinking about there? Somebody throw that back at me. What was I talking about? No, it wasn't free speech. Yeah, that thought has definitely gone. Isn't that interesting? Maybe that's the natural order trying to tell me something. Maybe that was a thought not worth having. What I'm coming to is that being told from on high that there is only one solution to the problem, this collectivist idea, this idea that one-size-fits-all solutions come down from, the Summit for the Future, or from the World Health Organization, or from the World Economic Forum, or the United Nations, or the Trilateral Commission, or the Club of Rome, or whatever, or the Bilderbergs. Any top-down solution is, in and of itself, doomed to failure. My friend Nick Hudson of Panda, he's got what he calls Hudson's razor, which is a heuristic that says, if you're being told it's a global crisis, if you're told there's only one solution to it, and if any dissent from that solution, it has to be crushed by censorship and silencing. If those three things come together for Hudson's razor, you're dealing with a scam, right? So that's how you do it. So by definition, the climate crisis is a scam. COVID was a scam. All of these things. And the not only but also philosophy is about the idea that the top-down, one-size-fits-all solution is a refusal on the part of the stupid, clever people that think they know how to run the world. It's the refusal to contemplate, far less to embrace complexity. They are not awake to the complexity of what it is to be human and alive. And it's the subsidiarity, and it's the local solutions, and it's the kind of activities that Derek and Dan are active about. It's therein that the solutions lie, because it's those things that embrace complexity and allow the people that are actually at the bleeding edge of the problem to come up with the solution that best suits them, rather than trying to gerrymander somebody else's solution from 1,000 miles away and making that be the solution to the problem. So that is where not only but also comes from. I'm running out of time. I've run out of time. I just want to sum up. As I say, I stand before you as somebody who is as guilty, who has been as complicit in the problem as anybody you can think of. I'm still transacting via a bank account. I'm still, buying all of my food from supermarkets. I'm still doing all of these things. But I am awake to the situation in which we find ourselves. And it's because of my, I suppose, the humility, that I've realized how little I actually know that makes me come to events like these. Because as soon as I walk into, when I upstairs where the meeting rooms are, as soon as I'm in there and people come up to me and talk, I know I've done the right thing just by turning up. And when I'm in here with all of you, I know I've done the right thing just by turning up. And so I'm not a solutions person. I consider myself, I suppose, all I really am is everyman. I think if what I have said over the last 4 years has chimed with people, it's only because the people that hear what I'm saying already know it. I'm not actually telling any of you anything that you don't know. And that's why when you hear me say it, it registers, because all I'm doing is articulating thoughts and wisdom and knowledge and common sense and experience that all of you have. The truth is like electricity. I had one of those vibration experiences upstairs. Did you all do the vibrating chairs? I thought my fillings were going to come out. The truth is like electricity. It looks to get to earth. And the rod that it runs through is us. We channel the truth. And when it passes through us, we feel it. Lawrence van der Post, A Story Like the Wind. The story is like the wind. It comes from a far-off place and we feel it. The truth is like that. You don't need to be told it. It passes through you whenever you come in contact with it. It's like if you're in the pub or you're sitting around a dinner table and the chat's going really well and you say something that just makes the whole room fall apart. You come away with this perfect quip. 99 times out of 100, if you analyze it afterwards, you didn't compose the thought. It just was on your lips and you said it. It came from somewhere else and it made everybody laugh because it's the truth. That is why it's funny, because everybody that hears the quip knows it's true, and that's what makes them laugh out loud. And the truth is like that, and that's really all I have been able to do for the last 4 years. You know, people that come up to me and they say it to me all the time. You said the thoughts that were in my head. And if I have done that, I am inordinately, inexpressibly grateful for having been able to do that. So as I say, I just stand before you as every person. I've got all of the same concerns. I make all of the same mistakes. I have been every bit as ineffectual in grasping the nettle of moving on to the next phase. But I'll say this and close. Just by standing here with you, I know I'm doing the right thing. Thanks very much.